All that and more when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into Cornerstone values. Welcome into Devy Devotional. I am your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox and Andy Starr, and that is at Aaron Wilcox 86 on Twitter and at A_FF on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be wrapping up that Devy mock draft, one round. That's all we did, just an easy one. We only got 6 done last time because we like to talk a lot. We're going to do the second half of the first round there. But then the important thing is we're going in, we're looking at those cornerstone values. We're trying to figure out where are these Devy players valued right now in the NFL realm, in the dynasty realm, and we're trying to figure all that kind of stuff out. So a lot of fun stuff, a lot of talking, a lot of figuring out. I will do a little recap here in a minute, but first let's check in with the boys. Aaron, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, I am doing well. Excited to get back to the part two around, picks 7 through 12, I guess, so the second half of the first round of this Devy mock draft. And it was kind of fun last time just talking like what NFL players maybe we would prefer and or maybe which guys we are taking on the college side instead of the NFL players. So just that discussion in general, it's valuable for dynasty leagues, for Devy and C2C leagues. So hopefully a good amount of applicability here for everybody listening.
Andy, how are you doing? And are you ready to stump the king? Aaron is up for Guess the Guy today.
I'm gonna do my best. I think I pulled somebody who's not too irrelevant. I think Aaron definitely knows who this person is, so he should be able to get it at some point. Whether it gets to the rhyming word or not before he figures it out remains to be seen. But aside from that, I am excited to wrap up the draft. I don't even remember who our first 6 picks were, so you're gonna have to help me out with a recap once. I know it's in the show sheet, which I don't even have pulled up right now, but
Andy's not
once,
prepared today.
once John tells me who we picked last week, I'll be ready to roll.
All right. Well, I actually no. Let's go ahead and talk about it right now. We picked Jeremiah Smith, Arch Manning, Ryan Williams, Nicholas Singleton, Jordan Tyson, and Lenore Sellers. I obviously surprised you guys with Sellers there at the end.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's definitely a few guys outside of the top 6 here that probably maybe will upset some people or say, why didn't you pick that guy? Fear not. I think at least the 2 that I think that are coming to most people's minds, definitely one is going to go shortly hereafter. But this is Devy. You can listen to ADP and rankings all you want. It's the Wild West out there. Just pick the guys that you think give you the best chance at having some NFL success in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure there's going to be some good ones. And I will say, I'm a man of my word. I did not just take Lenore Sellers. I actually moved him up my ranks, and I moved him ahead of another player that will probably be going pretty soon. Like I said, I'm a man of my word. I sat down and I actually thought about it and I said, you know what? Like, I truly believe he's going to take that next step. And I can't say that I've been able to say that about a lot of these guys, especially a lot of just like the athletic first, those athletic specimens. I've never truly been the guy that's like all in on those guys, but for whatever reason, I'm all in on Sellers. So here we are. But first, obviously, we have to get to Guess the Guy so we can stump Aaron. Then we will jump into that second part of the mock there, talk about those cornerstone ranks and all that kind of stuff. Let's go. Are you guys ready to Guess the Guy? Let's guess the guy. Bing. I recognize that music from
guitar
somewhere.
riff, man. Wow. All right, Aaron. Guess the guy. Here we go. What have we been doing? Are we allowing just like a random guess off the front? Because we haven't done a point system for that. Usually we're given.
I'll allow it.
All right. Okay. If you, Aaron, if you are so inclined, you can throw out any person you want.
Let's go. Isaac Brown, Louisville, running back.
It is not Isaac Brown, and it's not a running back. This particular guy is a wide receiver.
Nice. Also, for this game, are we just doing wide receivers and running backs? I can't remember if we decided on any quarterbacks.
Well, we decided you could do quarterbacks, but instead of like a market share, you would just say how many passing yards they had the previous season.
Okay.
But in this case, it's a wide receiver, so. Anybody?
Oh, am I playing too?
Bueller?
I will go with Deion Burks, Oklahoma wide receiver.
Deion Burks is incorrect. 2024 market share, 32.5% receiving yards market share in 2024.
Pretty decent market share.
Yeah.
Chase Brown, Kansas State wide receiver.
Good guess. Not the right guess. This player is entering his 4th season in college football.
Not Jace.
Entering his 4th season. Okay. Pretty big time share.
It was. I feel like I'm not trying to help, but I feel like this. I can't say anything without helping. So.
Just keep your comments to yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Definitely narrows it down to a few guys here. Just got a Malachi Fields, wide receiver, transferring into Notre Dame.
Fields, who
from
plays
Virginia.
for Notre Dame. No, that's not correct. Good guess. Let's
like
narrow
that
it down
guess.
a little bit further and say this player is on a team in the SEC.
Okay. SEC, huh?
Have all of our players been from the SEC so far? I think they
Probably. Maybe we slipped a Big Ten in there.
Caden Lee, Jade Knott,
Barry and Brown.
Barry and
Evan
Brown,
Mosley.
and Emmett Mosley. They're all SEC players.
So you didn't differentiate between last season and this season. So I'm assuming that like currently this guy is SEC. Is that what you were meaning there?
He's on a team in the SEC.
Okay,
Ooh.
very good, very good.
He's not as nice
I
as
used
I was
those
last
words very precisely because I was like, I need to make sure that I don't say anything that tells him whether or not he transferred or not.
week.
Oh man, somebody with that big of a share on an SEC team, going to be a 4th-year guy. It's a pretty big share, though. That's the thing.
I feel like it. I feel
It
like it
is.
has to be a transfer.
It is a big share. It even caught me off guard. I was like, no way. Holy crap. This guy. But yeah, here we are.
That's why we play this game beyond just stumping each other.
Yeah.
You learn stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. KC Concepcion, Texas A&M wide
KC
receiver.
Concepcion. I believe he's entering his 3rd year. But, this gets tricky. But maybe the team will help you figure it out. He plays for Missouri, the Tigers. Or at least he's on their team right now.
Oh man, this is a tough one.
I'm just trying to think of like who transferred in there because I mean Marquise Johnson, our favorite
I
breakout
just figured out who
candidate
it
here.
was.
He's a fun guy, but he had a pretty small market share last season. Theo Weiss is gone. Luther Burden is gone. Um, I'm just trying to even think like who could have.
You're gonna have to get the rhyming word.
This guy. Must be like a deep name or something like that. Um, Trying to think like lower level competition. That's typically who transfers up to like SEC.
Uh,
All right, you can hit me with the rhyme.
all right, I'm sorry I had to do this to you, but it's not even that bad, honestly. Now that John knows it, he's probably like, "Wow, this is an interesting one." But the name
Yeah.
rhymes with Seven Dolman.
Oh, Kevin Coleman Jr.
Yeah.
There you go.
I'm sitting here. I was thinking it had to be a G5 guy, transferring up, and it really wasn't. I'm like,
Mississippi State, if you could believe it, he had a 32% market
That's
share
wild.
for Mississippi State last year, almost 1,000 yards.
Dang. Yeah. Hey, that was a tough one, I will say. Out of all the guys that we've played yet in this game, like that by far is like the deepest cut.
yeah.
But for Devy purposes. But I
Yes.
mean, I guess I was not aware of that market share last season. Maybe that does put him on our radar a little bit more than he
Perhaps.
currently
Yeah.
has been. Yeah.
It's one of those
what-
ones where,
kinda wild.
when I was doing it, I was like, I like Kevin Coleman to some extent, but his yards per route run is over 2. And, yeah, the market share is huge. The reception yards per team pass attempt is good. Maybe he does have a huge year with Eli Drinkowitz at Missouri. Whether it's him or Marquise Johnson, we'll see.
It's kind of wild. I mean, the second highest receiver on the team was Jordan Mosley with 405 yards. He had 932 and 6 touchdowns. I mean, they only threw for 2,800 yards, so that's kind of wild. That like you said, that's kind of one that we want to have to go back and look and say, do we have to rethink this ranking a little bit at least?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, he was a fun
I thought it
recruit.
was a decent one.
Yeah, he's a fun
A bit of a
recruit. I
deep
mean, yeah, right. I mean, I don't expect him to be ever like a true dynamic threat, but he could be a good slot player. Like think of like the Jacoby Myers of the world, or Khalil Shakir's, or guys like that. As far as how Kevin Coleman it will likely win because it's not going to be necessarily as a true deep threat down the field, but he's got some nuance to his game. I've liked enough of what I've seen there, but again, how high is the ceiling for a guy like that?
He's like Luther Burden if he knew how to play football.
Yes. What a comp. And like 40 pounds lighter, unfortunately. 50 pounds.
Oh
maybe.
yeah. He's gonna jump up there like 20, 30 pounds this year as a senior.
yeah.
He's gonna be a big boy now. All right, well that was Guess the Guy. We got Aaron with 1 point this time. This is giving me hope. We got 1 point for Andy, 1 point for Aaron. So my next go around next week, hopefully I can make up some ground on these boys.
No, Aaron's going to give you a tricky one. He has to. Like now it's become warfare.
Yeah, yeah, we were so nice in the beginning. We're like, oh, I'll just give you this top 15 guy, no big deal.
We weren't even nice. You gave me Caden Lee, which most people would be like, I don't even think he's like top 40 in most people's wide receiver ranks. I mean, don't get me wrong. I appreciated that one. He's a fun player, and this will be a fun game going forwards for sure.
All right, well, why don't we dive into Devy? All right, like I said, we did the first half of a Devy mock last week. Jeremiah Smith, Arch Manning, Ryan Williams, Nicholas Singleton, Jordan Tyson, and Lenore Sellers were the first 6 picks. We went in depth on those players. We do not need to talk about them any longer. Go back and make sure you listen to that pod if you want to hear what we think about those players and where we rank them for NFL purposes as we speak. Now we're going to be doing the same thing. Aaron is back on the clock. We'll be doing a 1-2-3, 1-2-3 kind of deal. Aaron is back on the clock at 107. Who are you taking?
I'm going to take a guy who I think has just a blend of athleticism, um, height, size, playing in the right conference, an up and coming team, and really had a nice freshman season. And that is Cam Coleman, Auburn wide receiver. And there are some options at the wide receiver position here, which would be completely acceptable in my opinion to select here in the second half of the first. It does start to drop off here, so a little bit of a step down from the guys that I think we drafted here in the top six. But Cam Coleman, just a very talented wide receiver. As far as like NFL purposes too, I mean he is like a T Higgins. Like I mean, there's a lot of similarities there ultimately, and so that's where you start asking like, well, do I want a guy like a T Higgins who has already kind of proven it at the NFL level? Yes, I mean in my opinion. But then you start going down the ranks a little bit, and you find some guys, or you can start poking holes in their game. So maybe you have to go all the way down to where we said last episode is like the Matthew Goldens of the world, and then you got like the Luther Burdens and the Josh Downs and Mike Evans. You could make a case for Cam Coleman there, but even then, he is not truly breaking out. He's flashed. He's a great recruit. He has a lot of things going his way, but I'm still not comfortable slotting him in quite ahead right now in Devy purposes. This is not C2C, but in Devy. So Cam Coleman's probably going to come in a little bit after that. You're probably looking more at like the Keon Coleman, the Khalil Shakirs, the Cortland Suttons, the Beshs, Kyle Williams. Then I want to take an upset or upside bet here on a Cam Coleman at the wide receiver position. How do you guys feel about both the selection and maybe where you would have him ultimately?
For me, Cam Coleman was easily the next wide receiver that was going to come off the board. I think the gap between him and Ryan Williams is much smaller than the gap between Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith. Which is speaks to Cam Coleman more than anything because Ryan Williams is obviously great, and I think Cam Coleman doesn't quite get the recognition that he deserves based on how good Ryan Williams was last year and obviously how great Jeremiah Smith was because he just kind of slots in as like the third wide receiver in this elite bunch. But when you were giving your NFL players, you mentioned Cortland Sutton, and that's kind of immediately where I was kind of thinking as far as, if I'm on a team who's really not in any danger of winning a championship this year, and I've got a guy like a 29, almost 30-year-old Cortland Sutton on my team, I would move him off my roster for somebody like Cam Coleman if I could. Same thing with like a Devontae Adams. We're talking teams where, like I said, you're not in any danger of trying to win anything this year. You just need to get these older guys off your team right now, and cash in on that value before it really just falls off the table. So that's kind of what I was looking at as well, like the Devontae Adams, Cortland Sutton range, and Cam Coleman. Like I said, I think he's somewhat underrated because Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith seem to get a lot of the attention out of this class, and rightfully so. But Cam Coleman's not really too far behind those guys.
Yeah, I like it. Looking at DLF's ADP for June, and yes, we did switch over to DLF. Now that we're with DLF, we're going to use the DLF stuff. We're done with KTC. None of that nonsense anymore. So, looking here, you're talking about Cortland Sutton. I'm looking at like guys right around him: Khalil Shakir, Jaden Reed, Trey Harrison, Jaden Higgins. That actually seems like a really good range right there. I mean, think about how hyped people were or are about Jaden Higgins right now, especially in the past couple months, how hyped they've been on Higgins. And maybe that calmed down a little bit once he got drafted kind of behind Nico and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, people were really excited about him. Everyone knows, anyone who's listened to us knows how we feel about Trey Harris. Cortland Sutton obviously had like a resurgence last year. Khalil Shakir kind of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but definitely like took a step forward last year and could possibly be the wide receiver one, or at least the highest receiving option for the Bills right now. It just seems kind of like a really good range for a player that I truly believe in Coleman. Coleman was getting a lot of hate last year around this time because he was too tall, he was too big, and players like that don't make it in the NFL. And then he just went out and dominated in college, and it was like, oh, okay, never mind. He's actually really good. He's going to be really good, and we're going to draft him very early now here at 107.
Yeah, very fair. And I will say Trey Harris is the one name there where I'm like, I'm for sure taking Trey Harris. Just a guy like, I mean, we kind of hope that Cam Coleman becomes a guy like that, or maybe better as a prospect, I suppose. But at the same time, I mean, Trey, he's demonstrated some great things. If he can stay healthy, he's in an awesome spot. Good draft capital, good enough athlete, all those things. So, but those other guys, yeah, fair game to take Cam Coleman ahead of them potentially.
Taking the names out of it, Cortland Sutton is wide receiver 44 in the June ADP. If we were just taking the name out of it, like, how do you feel about that range? 44, 42, 46, whatever.
That's fine.
I think it's fair just because he is still 2 years away from the NFL. So just, there's that risk baked into everything as well. And I think the part of the, everyone's very excited about this 2027 wide receiver class. There's like 7 or 8 guys, maybe let's say 6 or 7 guys that are like, Emmett Mosley included, and several others that are really high in people's rankings. And theoretically, some of these guys aren't going to pan out. Like, it's just not going to work out for maybe 1, 2, possibly 3 of these guys that are really high in people's rankings right now. There's really no way of predicting which ones those are. We're pretty sure Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams and Cam Coleman aren't going to be one of them, but it's possible, right? So you got to kind of think about that when you're moving NFL talent for hypothetical talent 2 years from now.
Yeah, and speaking of Cam Coleman, I just wanted to say hi because my son Cole is listening. So I just want to say, hey Cole, what's up, man? Appreciate you listening. But that's enough of that. Andy, you are on the clock. 108. Who you taking?
All right, this one is probably going to seem obvious. I think he probably would have gone 5 picks earlier in any other Devy draft, and it's Florida's quarterback DJ Lagway. Last year, I feel like he had a pretty good season, honestly. Almost 10 yards per attempt, over 11 yards average depth of target. Little bit inconsistent accuracy-wise, under 60%. Threw a lot of interceptions. Some of them not his fault. Some of them were. But a lot of big-time throws, if you're going by that PFF stat, which I think does hold some value. I don't know. It's obviously a subjective stat, but it's something that I would pay attention to. 18 big-time throws as a true freshman. And he slings it. He's obviously dealing with the shoulder injury. Hasn't been throwing in spring, at least not in like game situations or playing situations. So, but everyone's really expecting him to come back. So, as far as like NFL value, we've already been talking about Lenoris Sellers and the question marks that we've had with him. I think the same thing can be said about DJ Lagway. Like, you shouldn't be moving off of somebody that is an entrenched starter in the NFL for a guy like DJ Lagway, because a lot could happen this season, with the injury, whether or not he lives up to, we saw it with Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold a year ago today was, by some people, considered the Devy QB1, and now he's lucky if he'll ever be a first-round draft pick again, depending on who you talk to. So, as far as like where I'd put him among like the current quarterback landscape, I think it's very similar to what I was talking about with Lenoris Sellers. If you're moving off of starter like Geno Smith or Sam Darnold, I think you should be very careful. But then once you get down to like guys like Matthew Stafford, who might be in his last season or two, or Anthony Richardson, who I definitely don't think is going to be anything in the NFL 5 years from now, then I think you could probably start to consider moving off of guys like that. But I think it's very similar to the Lenoris Sellers situation. You just got to be very careful, especially the guy who's at best 2 years away from the NFL.
Yeah, I like it. Lagway would have been my next pick. I obviously went back and forth when I took Sellers at 106. I was really going back and forth between Lagway and Coleman, and Sellers. Those, it was I really like all three players, and so it's like it was not an easy decision. That might be one of those places where you try to trade back and let someone make the decision for you or whatever it might be. But obviously in the moment I had to kind of like plant my flag, and I did with Sellers. Man, I love DJ Lagway. I want it to work out. You see the F on the hat. I want it to work out so well, but we know that Florida is just cursed, and doesn't seem to work out that way for them. But I'll tell you what, the intended air yards are there. The big time throw rate is so high. You love to see that. It's just the completion rate's not great. The interception rate's not great. He's clearly not. Uh, he's not 100%. He's not ready to go to the NFL or anything like that just yet, and which obviously he shouldn't be. But all we need to see is him take some minor steps forward this year. Like it's not like some of these players where we're like, Garrett Nussmeier has to completely change his game in order to be an NFL viable quarterback. That is definitely not the case with DJ Lagway. So I love the pick here. Like I said, I basically went back and forth between him and Coleman and Sellers with that 106. And then I was kind of hoping one of them might make it to me. And obviously that did not work out here for my 109. As far as the DLF ADP, it's kind of funny. We basically have that same mix of players where we have Anthony Richardson at QB 25, which I'm easily taking Lagway over Richardson at this point. I get people want to hold out hope and everything, but we've seen enough, guys. It's enough. Stafford at QB 26. Jackson Dart at QB 27, which is just wild to me. Like I get that he probably won't start or won't start a lot of games this year. If he does, he should not be QB 27 in my opinion. That's a little wild. So you're looking right around that range, but then you get into your Shadur Sanders, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck, and all that. So I'm perfectly fine having him above Anthony Richardson, even Stafford. It sounds like Stafford is kind of not long for this world, as far as the NFL is concerned. So perfectly fine with that. I get your Geno, and I'm with you with Geno, although I don't really hate it. But Darnold's the one with it. I can't get on board with you. I don't think Darnold's long for this world either. So I'm okay with him being ahead of Darnold as well. But I'm thinking right around that same range that we were talking about before. When we're looking QB 25, QB 26, something like that.
Yeah, I would agree. And then, I mean, I don't have him off of between Legway and between Lenora Sellers. I have them pretty similar. So I would agree with the guys that we threw out there. And if you go back and listen to last pod, some similar ranges for a guy like Lenora Sellers at South Carolina. So yeah, DJ Legway, it was a good pick here. I was kind of curious how far he would fall, but it seemed likely he would stay within the first round here.
So that brings me up the 109, and I'm basically between two players here, but I'm actually going to stick to my ranks this time, and I'm not going to go off script here. And I'm going to take a player that I seem to be higher on than most people, and I guess maybe it's just a crowded wide receiver core or whatever it is, but for whatever reason, people just I seem to be a lot higher on Bryant Westco Jr. than a lot of people, and I see him slipping into like the second rounds of drafts and things like that, and I'm not letting it happen here. I'm taking him at 109. I mean, we saw big playability, a high A dot, 700 yards as a true freshman. Like I don't know what more you want to really see from this guy. Definitely not that screen merchant or anything like that we've seen some of these other high end players be as a true freshman. You're talking about 2.13 yards per team pass attempt last year, an 18% market share as a true freshman, and 3.46 PPR points per touch as a true freshman. I get that there's other players to look at and think about, but I'll tell you what, he did everything I wanted him to do, and I wasn't even his biggest fan going into as a recruiter or anything like that. So this is me saying like, no, I've become a fan, and I'm taking him here at 109.
He was one of my guys as far as just loving him in the incoming freshman class, and I'm glad that yeah he's had that success so far, and he is in a crowded situation there at Clemson. There's two other guys who are going to also be commanding meaningful targets, but Wesco still was able to compete with those guys as a true freshman last season, and it looked pretty good. There are some things that we need to see out of him though. So he ultimately just played one side of the field. Like that was just he is not all over the field. He was not splitting both sides. It's just stick on one side. You have your niche role. But he displayed some really great skills within that role. Great mover. I think he has the athleticism and the route running abilities to play inside, outside, go deep, intermediates, underneath routes. So he's just got a lot of things going his way. Maybe not quite the crazy raw athlete that like a Cam Coleman is, but Bryant Wesco, he could be a much more nuanced player, which is very interesting. So I like him. He's a top 6 wide receiver for me in all like Devy rankings. So I definitely like him a lot. And as far as guys like that, I would consider on the like NFL side, well, we're actually talking very similar ones, in my opinion, to what we were talking with Cam Coleman. Like, I mean, I have Wesco just around there, like maybe potentially right behind Cam Coleman. So, again, we're talking like the Keon Colemans of the world. Cortland Sutton was a name that we already mentioned. Jack Besh, Jacoby Myers. Like, I'm starting to want the upside there with a guy like a Bryant Wesco.
Sorry, my daughter turned off all the lights in my house as we were sitting here talking. So I did you say Keon Coleman? Because I didn't really hear anything you said.
Yeah, I mean, he was just one of many guys who kind of goes roughly in that range that I'd rather have like a Bryant Wesco, I guess. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I'm looking at Keon Coleman here is wide receiver 54 at DLF ADP. We got Kyle Williams and Jack Besh right ahead of him, and then Rashad Bateman and Darnell Mooney behind him. With those names, are you still thinking that's where you want Wesco, or are you willing to go a little higher there?
Yeah, no, I'd be willing to potentially go a bit higher even, but for sure wanting Wesco amongst those names, taking that upside shot. But I will say, I mean, there is some intrigue among those guys. I mean, among those wide receiver options. So depending on the build, depending on how long you really want to wait and see if Wesco actually can take over as a little bit more of a lead option there. Yeah, I could see you ultimately trying to roll with some of those NFL guys too.
What do you think,
Yeah,
Andy?
around 50-ish. Yeah.
Yeah, I think first of all, I just want to say about Bryant Wesco. I think it's a travesty that he is widely considered less than T.J. Moore at this point in time. I think he's a better wide receiver than T.J. Moore by a considerable amount. I think his true competition on the team right now is Antonio Williams, who's obviously going into his 4th season. And he's more of like a, to what Aaron was saying, he's more of a versatile wide receiver. He can play everywhere, which is not what we've seen from Bryant Wesco, at least yet. But if I'm taking any one of the Clemson wide receivers, I think Wesco is easily the best out of the bunch at this point in time. I would agree with some of the players that Aaron was saying, similar range to what Cam Coleman is, maybe a little bit further down, but I think we had like wide receiver 44 for Coleman, and then we were talking about Keaton Coleman at wide receiver 54. I don't know where like a guy like Michael Pittman Jr. slots into the DLF, but
Yeah,
I think
that's actually what I was about to say. So if we just move up a couple spots, ahead of Jack Bash is Jacoby Myers, ahead of him is Debo Samuel, and then ahead of him is Michael Pittman, and then
yeah,
ahead of him is Josh Downs. And I was wondering if I would obviously want Downs ahead
I
of
think that's the
Wesco, but
line
maybe
for
right at
me.
that, right there.
Because Debo, I would definitely move for Bryant
Yep,
Wesco. I would think
yep.
about it with Michael Pittman Jr., but Downs, I would definitely keep Downs. So I think that's like right around a good range
Yeah,
for
right in
Wesco.
between Pittman and Debo, because like I'd probably want a little something extra or something if I'm getting rid of Pittman,
Yeah.
but I think right around that line though.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So that would be right at like wide receiver 50 that we're looking at Wesco there. I thought I was going to get a little pushback, but I guess Andy's definitely on board, and it sounds like Aaron's not that far off from us here. So I really did think I was going to get a little pushback. I'm looking at the DLF ranks for Wesco, and they're kind of all over the place from the rankers. And that's probably normal, I guess. Like I said, he seems to be kind of a polarizing player, or at least maybe people haven't decided who they want to like latch on to at Clemson just yet, and maybe that's what it is. It gets difficult, but like somebody has them at 8 overall, somebody has them at 14 overall, somebody has them at 22 overall, and then there's a couple others mixed in and everything. So it's like there's definitely some people that are absolutely in love, and some people are like, let's pump the brakes a little bit with Wesco.
I will just say I'll stake all my reputation that eventually Bryant Wesco will be drafted higher than TJ Moore. And
Ooh.
maybe it's not that hot of a take, but the way I've been hearing is like TJ Moore is the Clemson wide receiver to have at this point. I think Bryant Wesco easily clears TJ Moore.
I like it.
Yeah, that's bold. I mean, I'm also a TJ Moore fan, so that's really tough because I was a big fan of both of them. They both have stood out. I think Cape Kludnick has a great season there at Clemson and should be a pretty bright future for both of them. So I can't say with any certainty that I think that Wesco's like way ahead at this point, but I guess a little bit more nuance there. So yeah, I like it. And I suppose that puts me up here at the 110. Now, do we have any sponsors? Do we have any ads that we want to put out there, John?
Yes. Why don't we take a quick break? We'll be right back in 15 seconds. The Devy Devotional Podcast is brought to you by Fast Draft, the fastest best ball game on the planet. New to Fast Draft? Use promo code DEVOTIONAL to earn up to a $50 deposit match. Sign up now and start drafting faster. And we're back. Start drafting faster. That's what we're going to do. Actually, we're making decent time this time, so not too bad. Let's take our time and talk it through here with these old or the higher up guys.
Yes. So at the 110 position, I am torn on a couple of guys here. Who do I want to go with? And yeah, ultimately, I'm going to go with a position that has only been drafted once thus far, and it was by myself. And I'm going to go double tap at the running back position for one of the guys that I just am a big fan of, Jeremiah Love, Notre Dame running back. He's a big time play waiting to happen in the rushing and the receiving game. He has enough tenacity as a runner, enough physicality, and I think he's going to ultimately test well. He's going to have the requisite size that we need, and a good track record there at Notre Dame. So, or at least a good enough track record of them putting some guys into the NFL, and he is certainly just a guy that I liked as a incoming guy into college. It took him a little while to truly break out, but in that second season he looked great. So he will be an eligible guy for next year's NFL draft. I expect him to declare at that time, just because that class is not really loaded. I mean, there's definitely some opportunity for some running backs to go pretty highly in that draft. They just need to continue stepping up. It's not as deep of a class as we saw this season. So Jeremiah Love there at the running back position is the guy that I am going with.
Andy and I were both sitting here saying we got sniped. And Andy was obviously the next on the clock, but I think this was the clear and obvious next pick. I was going back and forth between the two. I really do like Wesco, and so I was like, you know what, I'm going to take that. Obviously, there's some size concerns and things like that with Jeremiah Love. So I mean, it's not like he's a perfect prospect, which obviously you can't say about any of them, but I just feel like maybe Wesco's a little safer, and so that's why I went that route. But it was not necessarily an easy decision, and I really do think he's like the clear and obvious next pick here.
Yeah, almost a 10% big time run rate, over 1 yards per route run, which is great from a running back. Almost 30 catches last season. There's some concern that like Jadarian Price is gonna potentially be something more than what he was last year, which I like Jadarian Price too. I think he's kind of just grossly undervalued. He's kind of like the discount Katron Allen. If you want to just get the RB2 of a place, just go for Jadarian Price because he's certainly somebody that you could look into as well. But what Jeremiah Love's season last year was so great. Is in a running back class where we just saw like all these 10, 12 running backs go off, and there's really not a lot left to really be excited about aside from somebody like Jeremiah Love and obviously Nicholas Singleton who was already drafted in this particular mock draft. So yeah, it was obvious. This is a guy who was going to go next because he's going to be at worst a top 2 or 3 running back in the class next year, and yeah, there's just a lot to love about his game. So you look at the running back rankings. You know, it's been a while since we talked about him because Nick Singleton went like what 103 or something. 10 a while. It was 103, I want to say. So it's been a while since we looked at the NFL side of this, but oh man, it's tough to really value running backs because it seems like their lifespan is definitely a little bit shorter than every other position. But if I had to put a value on Jeremiah Love right now, it would probably be right around like the James Cook range. Somebody who I would say has like maybe 1 or 2 good seasons left, and then beyond that, who knows what's going to happen. And James Cook is definitely not somebody that I'm worried about blowing up and being like a Saquon Barkley somewhere else if he does sign another contract. But yeah, I think that's about where I'd put him. Maybe in like the James Conner area. I'm trying to, I'm kind of casting a wide net here potentially, but
Yeah.
the
Unfortunately, with the running backs, like when you start talking about a 30-year-old running back like Connor, like obviously,
yeah,
people love him for what he did last year, but he's still 30 years old. So, you're talking about probably at least 10 spots from,
right.
it's literally 10 spots from, or 11 spots from
So
RB 17 to,
Let's say James Cook, who's like kind of at the lower end of maybe like the top. Where's he at? Like he's like RB8, maybe like the lower end of like the RB1, RB2 situation, and then you start to get to the older guys like Alvin Kamara, Joe Mixon. Uh,
yeah.
I would put him right around there personally.
So yeah, we have like R.J. Harvey, Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, Joe Mixon, Travis Etienne in a row here, ranging from RB 19 to RB 23. You kind of thinking somewhere right in that range?
I think so. So like the back end of like an RB2 would be a good spot for Jeremiah Love and generally speaking, if you're trading like straight up, I would definitely like move off the older guys before I would like the younger guys like R.J. Harvey, for example. But yeah, I would definitely consider moving those other guys for somebody like Jeremiah Love, especially on a team that's not in any danger of winning a championship or anything like that.
Obviously team dependent for this one, but I could see someone making a deal. Alvin Kamara, 29 years old, trade him for Jeremiah Love, on the campus side or on the Devy side, or either way. And if you're in the right position, I think you can actually get that deal done. I think that's like a really good line right around that range. And then now you're set up for the future if you're in a rebuild mode or if you're in C2C, and obviously you can actually use Jeremiah Love this year, then that's even more valuable. You'd probably have to add, I would assume, if you're talking about that. But for Devy purposes, you might be able to get away with, hey, here's like I'm going into like a retool for 1 year or whatever. Here's Alvin Kamara, give me Jeremiah Love, and we'll call it even or something to that effect.
Yeah, I do think that folks will be wanting a little bit more than just Kamara if they're going to give up a Love. Um, for sure. I mean, you can try, right? Guys pretty desperate to contend, and it's a Devy league, so you can't use Jeremiah Love this season. Yeah, I can totally understand trying to move like a Kamara, a Chuba Hubbard, Derrick Henry, somebody like that. Again, situation dependent. So, yeah, and Jeremiah Love, he's set up really well this season to have probably the most productive running back season out there, and probably the most efficient too, barring injury, of course. And his size, John alluded to that. There's been some questions with that in the past. I mean, the team site has him at 212 pounds. And ESPN and those, like last season, I think it was 206. So it's like he's kind of firmly in a very, very nice range for what the NFL is expecting nowadays. So I like that. He's not as risky as some will say. Like there are detractors out there, or just folks who are a little bit cautious with him, saying that the injury history is too great. And I just don't really think that there's anything significant. There's no, degenerative knee or huge knee conditions that we know of that are out there. He does not have a huge surgical history or anything like that that is notable. So those are all really good things going his way. So not a lot of red flags there, just little things that we got to make sure he stays hopefully healthy this season. So yeah, at the running back position, there's always risk, but in this range in Devy, why not take a shot on maybe that next top back?
No, I like it. I think we were all on board there. I really think the only question mark you can really say is his size, and if it sounds like that might not even be much of a question mark, or at least by the end of the year, by the time he goes into the combine, maybe he's like 215 or something like that, and we're really sitting here going, okay, well that was stupid, but yeah, if he can do anything like he did last year, he definitely opened my eyes last year. I was not the biggest fan, and he turned me into one. So we will see what he does this year. But I like the pick. Andy, don't snipe me. I kind of have a guy in mind now, and I really don't want you to take him.
I don't think I'm gonna take your guy. I mean, so we kind of like I would say it was like a kind of an agreement, but not really, that we wouldn't take freshmen here, incoming freshmen. I think one of the names that people are probably wondering is like when Bryce Underwood's going to get drafted. I'm not going to take him just because it's hard for me to value a guy that's never played a down in college football versus uh, where I would rank him among like current NFL players. So I'm not going to take Bryce Underwood. I am going to go with my next wide receiver, and that is Ohio State's Carnell Tate. Hopefully, I didn't snipe you. I don't think I did, but I think Carnell Tate is a guy who just kind of gets forgotten about because of what Jeremiah Smith did last year. But he with Emeka Egbuka moving on to the NFL, there's going to be a spot in that highly coveted wide receiver room of Ohio State. And Carnell Tate is a guy who's for his career always had over 2 yards per route run. He did pretty well last year, honestly. Considering who he was playing behind. So this could be like a breakout year. I think he's still gonna somewhat be in the shadow of Jeremiah Smith, but that shouldn't make a difference because Ohio State just kind of doles out the wide receivers. So he's a guy that maybe is a bit early as a first round draft pick, but I really feel like Carnell Tate is a guy who's going to safely be a day 2 pick next year, maybe even day 1 if things go right. So that's where I'm leaning right now, anyway.
Yeah, like I guess technically you didn't snipe me. I was really between two players there, but I want to like plant my flag on one, and it was not Coleman. So or Tate. I mean, not Coleman. It was not Carnell Tate. So I but he definitely was in the mix there for me. I actually do have a little concern in the back of my mind. Like some of these players, we're already getting what's his name, Quentin something. I cannot think of his of the names right now. But there's a couple of freshman wide receivers that are already getting hyped at Ohio State. Already got lost their black stripe or got their black stripe, whatever the hell it is.
Quincy Porter. Quincy Porter.
Quincy Porter, thank you. That's who it was, and he was a guy that Devy or Freshbeth was all over. Was Quincy Porter, and people were like not giving him any love because like, oh, he's going to be year 1-0 and all that kind of stuff. And now he got his black stripe and he's good to go, and he's getting a lot of spring hype and everything. So now all of a sudden it's this amazing thing. Well, we've also had concerns of like Tate's always kind of been mid, but we've given him the benefit of the doubt because obviously of Jeremiah Smith ahead of him, obviously of Emeka Egbuka, and even a couple other people that mixed in. There were older players, so you give him the benefit of the doubt. But I just wonder what happens if he doesn't take that step forward? What happens if someone really does, take that wide receiver 2 role behind Smith, and we don't see it be Tate? I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just saying his numbers aren't amazing. So, it's like when you're looking at it, what he's done, it's more like making excuses than it is like, oh my God, I absolutely love this player so much right now.
And
Yeah,
I
and I
like
hear
Cardinal
that.
Tate.
Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah, all I was gonna say is I like Cardinal Tate a good amount too, and I think that there is that valid concern out there, just like how dynamic is he as a player. But we mentioned a guy earlier, Michael Pittman Jr. And I think that there's some similarities there. Where is Cardinal Tate ever going to be that truly dominant downfield guy like a Devonte Adams? Or playing in that type of a style where he can win underneath and deep. I'm not sure, but he can certainly win in those intermediate to short areas, and he has some size to that frame for sure. So I think, yeah, at a Michael Pittman Jr. range, we've talked about him before. Was that maybe 50-ish in the overall ADP for the wide receivers? I think that's very safe to start saying, you know what, maybe I would rather take a shot on a Cardinal Tate to have slightly more upside, kind of re-roll to somebody younger. And if you're in a rebuild, try to take a guy like Cardinal Tate over the Jacoby Myers, a Kyle Williams, Jack Besh, etc. of the world. So we know what Ohio State does for the development of these wide receivers, and potentially some of that production has just been muted because of the other talent there too. So we can't completely nuke what he has done thus far, because there's just been the Emeka Bukas, the Jeremiah Smith, etc. Those are very good players in their own right. So it would relegate or at least diminish slightly from what Cardinal Tate has done at Ohio State production wise. I think that's a good pick in this range. He was probably my next wide receiver actually.
Yeah, we've basically already gone over that range of wide receivers like you were talking about. Maybe I would drop him down a few spots. So, like, maybe right into that Keon Coleman, Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney kind of range. I really have no issues with any of those. Like, I'm not holding on to hope of, like Darnell Mooney was a player that I was saying, like, hey, he could be a lot better than, like, people were basically just saying he was going to be writing him off and saying he was going to be nothing last year. And I was like, I don't know. You get him for a third, he could be valuable. Well, there's a difference between being valuable and actually being like great and being amazing for your team. And I guess I would say that Darnell Mooney does not have that ability anymore, but Carnell Tate could. And like I said, it's not me hating on him. He was within my next like pick or two as well. So definitely not me hating on Tate. I'm just saying there's a little concern in the back of my mind. Like, what if he doesn't become that guy?
Yeah, and it's hard with Ohio State because they've got a room full of a million 5 stars. So the fact that he had 700 yards receiving last year with Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka on the same team. Granted, they played like a million games because of the playoffs and whatnot, but I think it gives him a leg up on a guy like Quincy Porter. I think Quincy Porter probably slots more into like that market share that Carnell Tate was dealing with last year. But who knows? We'll see. We can't predict the future. We're just got to wait and watch the games.
Alrighty, I guess that brings me up, and so I'm going to plant my flag. Like I said, I can't help it with these. People are getting excited about the 2027 class, and rightfully so. Unfortunately, I think that people are getting a little overhyped about the 2027 class, and like, oh, I'll trade my entire team away for 27 first, and it's like, yeah, let's not do that. But we can definitely get excited about these players, and one of those players that I'm excited about is Nick Marsh out of Michigan State. I think when you see a 25% market share as a true freshman, but then along with that, you see the efficiency numbers of 2.8 PPR points per touch, 15.8 PPR yards per reception, 2.01 yards per team pass attempt as a true freshman, and an 11.5 A dot. So I mean, he's getting down the field, he's getting open, he's obviously being targeted a lot, and he had 672 yards on a team that only passed for like 2,500 yards last year and 11 touchdowns, and he had 3 of those. So yeah, there's not much else you could ask for from a true freshman as like what else are you gonna say? Like a team that throws for 2,500 yards, like what you want him to pass 1,000 yards? Like what else can he do? So I love the player. I think of the remaining guys that I'm looking at here, and there's a few guys that I like in this range and everything, but I'm willing to bet that he could actually be like the next big thing when it's all said and done.
I like Marsh. I don't know if I have him quite as high as some of the other guys that we've mentioned thus far, but obviously it's the 12th pick, right? Some of these other guys have gone off the board, and it's not a bad next option. And definitely a guy I have top 12 at the wide receiver position in Devy. So, maybe a little bit of uncertainty there. Like, what does Michigan State bring to the table developing him as a wide receiver? Like, what will his production ultimately look like? But he's off to a very promising start. I don't see any reason to say, like, he's going to. Take a step backwards or anything like that. You'll be battling with like the Dwight Peebles contributor at Campus again. Like he's a big Michigan State guy and Nick Marsh guy. I know there's a couple guys actually at campus2ken.com too, right? Who are pretty bullish on Marsh. So you're not the only one, but that's a solid pick here for sure. Like you said, he has a lot of upside with his game. Yeah, so I don't have a lot to add other than he is in a very similar slot to where we were just talking about at the wide receiver position. So we start
Yeah.
getting into maybe the Keon Colemans of the world, or like, you get down in that range, and I could start like the Rashad Bateman's. Like, okay, they're a little bit iffy. The Moonies. Um, I would consider taking a guy like Marsh there, though I have him a bit lower than the other guys we just talked about, like Carnell Tate or Brant Wesco, all of them.
Yeah, I think you got to have him a little bit lower, just because I mean you're talking about waiting so long, and yes, of course I love the player, but it's still Michigan State. You can't get too overly excited about that. So I'm wondering like Jalen McMillan, Wandale Robinson, Jalen Royals, Pat Bryant, like in that range, which is not that much further down than what we were just talking about. Um, I guess it gets kind of boring if we're just talking about wide receiver after wide receiver because like there's a definite cutoff in Dynasty where it's just like these guys don't matter anymore, and it's right around that wide receiver 55 to wide receiver 60 range where it's like, holy crap, guys, it's either unproven rookies that we're hoping for the best, or guys that are completely falling off the face of the planet, like a. Romeo Dobbs or Quentin Johnston or somebody like that.
See, for me, I think the better exercise is to like say, if you're trading for Devy talent, to me that means like your team's rebuilding. So then I start to look at guys like Stephon Diggs, who's like 30, almost 32 years old. Well, he's 31 and a half years old, on a new team. He's got some character concerns. I don't know how TMZ and all that stuff. I don't know how much weight you can put on that, but is that a guy you want to move off of right now and just go for like a guy who is potentially going to be. And just to talk about Nick Marsh, I think Nick Marsh is great too. Is despite the Michigan State, we're not helmet scouters here. He was awesome at Michigan State last year, despite them being like an awful team. And to his credit, he stuck around. He could have easily transferred anywhere else, but he's still there. So they're obviously trying to build something there in the passing game. So Aiden Childs is still there. I know he's a guy that people have had hope for at one point or another as a Devy quarterback. So we'll see what happens. But as far as freshman seasons go, like he's right there with the rest of these guys from that 2027 class. So yeah, I think that's about the range though that what you guys are talking about in that wide receiver 50 to 60 range. That's just if but generally speaking, if I'm moving off of a guy, I want him to be older and like give him to somebody else that hopefully needs that more than me, or maybe that older receiver's on a team that he would have been like the fourth or fifth option on my bench before I would consider starting him in a wide receiver spot. So, but I think that's probably around the range that I would consider him as well.
And that's fair with the older guys. Like, you look at Cooper Cup going to Seattle. Like, he's 32 years old. You got to start thinking. I mean, if you have any questions on your ability to compete, then maybe you do take a shot on a guy like Marsh. Or, I mean, you said, older guys. I think that's a great route to go. But even if you have some younger guys, you just don't really believe in them, right? You're just like, A.D. Mitchell at this point, just don't really think he's going to pan out. Maybe you do take that gamble. Or you say, like, Wan'Dale Robinson, like, we kind of know what he is. Like, yes, he's young. He's like 24 and a half. You may consider moving a guy like that for a Marsh. It just depends, I guess, on your conviction with those guys. Like Romeo Dubs, I am not in on Dubs. I just really don't think he's ever going to carve out a big share, be a meaningful guy. I'd rather take that shot on a Nick Marsh who could potentially be a big time asset in 2 years down the road. So you can weigh it with the old guys for sure, or even some of the young guys if you find a trade partner that's pretty interested in somebody you're kind of giving up on.
Man, you mentioned AD Mitchell, and I'm just thinking of the conversations that we've had over the past year or so about AD Mitchell, especially, in last year's draft range. And I'm looking, he's wide receiver 77 on DLF's ADP, June ADP. Like, how good does that feel? Like, vindication. Um, Man, like the conversations that we had with people, and they're like, "No, you just don't get it. Like he was just better than Xavier Worthy. Like you don't understand. Like he's just better."
We already knew. We knew.
Oh, those were the times, huh? And he's still going pretty high in like the keep trade cuts of the world. So I'm glad that DLF has him a little bit lower there amongst those drafters, which tend to be sharper, right? So, but you could still get a guy like AD Mitchell, get some value, I should say, for him if you're trading him away. It just needs to be the right trade partner.
Yeah. And as Andy was saying, like, oh, you can sell your Stephon Diggs, and you mentioned Cooper Kupp, Aaron. The funny thing is they're back to back, wide receiver 58 and wide receiver 59. So like I have no issues with that. That's definitely more of like a team build kind of thing. Obviously, you're not trading for Nick Marsh if you are going for it all this year, So if you have that capability, of course, that makes sense. But like Aaron was saying, like Xavier Legette is next on the board. Cedric Tillman's right behind him. Like I'm easily sending those two guys, even though they're not old. They're 23 and 25 years old respectively. I'm easily sending that. And then Romeo Dobbs is only 25 years old as well. Doing that, Jalen Coker is exciting because he was a no name that they got some yardage and all that kind of Give me Nick Marsh.
You're not a cokehead there, John?
I'm not a cokehead, at least not anymore. No, yeah, just like all those names. So like, I don't think it has to be. I don't think it has to be an age related thing. It's just like you can get into like those AD Mitchells, like those kind of guys, like Aaron was saying. If they have some kind of value, go get a Nick Marsh. Even if it takes something else, if you have to throw something else in, make it work. I was telling Andy before we jumped on here, I had a trade that I wanted to get done. I took over an orphan 2 years ago in a C2C league, and I wanted nothing to do with Will Shipley. If you guys have heard me, listen to me, you knew I was never in on Will Shipley and never believed in him. When he was like being considered a top 5 running back, I was completely out. And I took over this orphan. It had Shipley, and I said I want to get rid of him. I actively wanted to get rid of him. But I was trying to get Will Shipley prices of like what people were saying, and it just never worked out. And guess what? I still have Will Shipley on that team because I never traded him because I was always trying to get like the prices that other people were talking about rather than the prices that I just wanted. I just wanted to get out. And so I guess the lesson learned there is, sometimes just get out. Even if even if you have to throw an extra second, an extra third, whatever. I can promise you, if I'd made some of the trades that were close, that were like a third apart or a second apart or whatever, I'd probably be a lot happier than still having Will Shipley on my team right now.
That's fair. Even though Will Shipley could be in a nice situation this season, but as far as a few other guys,
He just doesn't have talent.
Yeah, right. It's not spectacular. But yeah, a few other guys that maybe we should mention here. I actually was thinking TJ Moore might go in this mock. So I was a little
Hmm.
bit surprised with that Clemson wide receiver. Obviously, we hear from Andy, it was probably not going to be him selecting TJ Moore. But if we were going into the second round, like I would have considered him. Would you start going with the freshman? Like I don't know if anybody else here was thinking about like the next guy up being a quarterback, like an incoming freshman quarterback, Bryce Underwood going to Michigan, Keelan Russell going to Alabama, or maybe a wide receiver, Corian Moore, going to Oregon, where there's a lot of opportunity for him to be the stud right away. Like look at like a Ryan Williams, or somebody like that who can kind of be that number one from day one, who's a dynamic playmaker, 5-star guy, in a Decoria Moore. So I guess those were a couple names. There's a few running backs I guess people could consider here as well to be the third running back off the board. I guess any strong takes here and like if there's a clear next guy or any other guys that we want to mention.
For me, running back wise, I think it's probably Caden Durham off the board next. I know most people are probably yelling Justice Haynes into the screens, but you know how I feel about Justice Haynes, and I think John and Aaron feel similarly. It's been three. This is his third year now. Like we haven't seen it now. It's probably not going to happen tomorrow. So uh, the the obvious omissions were the freshmen that Aaron just mentioned. Maybe another quarterback off the list that people might. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier is people one that people are probably thinking should be in the top 24 at least. Maybe not a first round draft pick. And then also Sam Levitt is a guy that I could see being like a good second round draft pick, but definitely not first round. Um, and then for me, the wide receiver that could be, for me, maybe even above TJ Moore. I would put him above TJ Moore as Texas's Ryan Wingo. So those are maybe the names that should be mentioned at least, but probably not first round draft picks in my opinion. But certainly people that are talented and should be talked about.
Wow, I completely lost track of time here. I did not realize we were already over the hour. Yeah, I'm with you on all those guys. I'm not as high on Wingo. I'm definitely not in on Justice Haynes, at least as far as him being the next guy. I think the only one that we really didn't touch on was Darius Taylor. I know he's kind of a mixed bag, but I mean the dude's just a workhorse running back that like, has a hell of a receiving game to him. Great size, still puts up a decent big time run rate and everything, and just kind of does everything you want him to do. So I know I guess there's a little bit of injury concerns. I think that kind of gets overblown, but he hasn't missed that much time, if much. So I think he'd be the only one, and he's actually like on my mind here in the next couple picks. TJ Moore would have been probably my next pick after Marsh, and I kind of went back and forth between the two, but like it's kind of like, do you want the guy with the crowded wide receiver core, or do you want the guy that's all by himself that can really make it like a true big name for himself? And I'm like, give me that guy that's already kind of done it, but then on top of that, like he could just be the team, again, and really make a name for himself. So that's why I went ahead and went with Marsh there. But yeah, definitely a great exercise here to go through that and then try to figure out uh, where we fit them in for DLF or for NFL purposes, for dynasty purposes. It's nice to get those kind of thoughts into your head, and especially talking about some of these deeper guys when you start getting into those names where you're like, man, get off my team, get this guy. You can fix a lot of mistakes by doing these kind of exercises and start thinking about it. And if obviously we can go deeper later on in the off season, all that kind of stuff, but if you can just get you start thinking this way, you can make so many more moves and you can get so much more done, in the off season and prepare yourself for future years before they break out, like that kind of thing. And that's when you need to do this kind of stuff. Obviously, we will be here to help you out. DLF will be here to help you out as well. We appreciate them. Obviously, we had the big news last week of partnering with them, still going strong, doing all that. So we appreciate DLF, appreciate Aaron, appreciate Andy. I am going to go to sleep because I have a 14-hour drive tomorrow. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here. We're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys. Maybe if I could find the outro.